the Supreme Court, the decision to pick up this case about the electors coming out of the state. We haven't touched on January 6th. And this week, the hearing with Mark Meadows Lieutenant, essentially, was, I think we need to see the sort of the other side of this, but it was connective tissue between two, real sort of strands of this, which is what they were doing in the White House and what was happening outside the White House with the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. And this week, that connective tissue was basically, at least we saw like sort of almost like the MRI of it. We haven't seen it in person, but we've seen the MRI of it, and largely in part because this Hutchinson, she changed lawyers and was no longer with a lawyer being paid by Donald Trump. And so she decided to testify publicly. You wrote about this. It's interesting. They're doing the same thing with her testimonies. They're sort of doing with the Roe decision. They're basically saying like, nothing to see here. Here's one tiny, talk about that a little.
Right. She's just a little coffee girl, it was no biggie. And basically, she couldn't have possibly seen what she said she saw, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Well, yeah, I think what you just mentioned, this connective tissue, I think that this was the first glimpse that we've had of how they're bringing this entire coup plot and the various strands of it, which Liz Cheney, in her opening statement in the original primetime hearing, indicated, that the plot was, there were several different strands of it, and but they were all leading to the same thing. And it was as if they had, they tried this, and then they tried this, and they tried this. They had all these legal, attempts quasi-legal attempts to try and deal with this thing through the court. And then finally, the last ditch effort, if you will, of January 6th, we did not know whether or not the White House was directly involved in that. And we still don't know. But what we did find out was that Trump and Meadows, and probably a number of others, were completely unsurprised by the fact that there was violence at the Capitol that day. They didn't. Mark Meadows kept doom scrolling when he goes, "Yeah, well, thanks for letting me know." When they came in and told him there were armed, rioters in the crowd, Donald Trump said, bring them in, get rid of the metal detectors. I want all these armed people in my crowd, which I'm now going to send up to the Capitol. We found that neither of them were surprised by events that were happening that day. Now, maybe they just were tired. Perhaps they just didn't have a reaction for other reasons. But it stands to reason that they did know. And I've mentioned this on here before. One of the comments that has really struck me from the moment I read it was in the Woodward and Costa book on the night of January 5th, that Trump was once more trying to pressure Mike Pence to do what he did. And Pence said, "I don't have the authority to do it." And Trump was standing at the window, opened the door, and it was cold air coming in. This was very vibrant, detailed description of the room in the Oval Office. And there was a crowd outside because they were having rallies the night before, including the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And they were coming in, and they could hear him cheering out there in the street. And Trump turned to Pence when he said, "I don't have the authority." And he said, "What if these people say you do? Wouldn't that be cool?" I guess you can say he was just talking off the top of his head, but to me, it sounded from the moment I read it that he had at least some knowledge of the fact that that there were plans afoot to use the crowd to pressure Pence to do what he wanted him to do. And these meetings that were being held at the Willard Hotel, the war room with Steve Bannon. It's hard to believe that this group of misfits could have been, heading up this coup plot. But when you look at what happened, you can sort of see it that, maybe that's all it takes is a crew of misfits to pull something like that off. And Meadows was going to go over there. According to Cassidy Hutchinson, he said, I got to go to a meeting over at the Willard. And she somehow talked him out of doing it and said, why don't you just call in, which he did. Why was Mark Meadows calling into the Willard Hotel? Why Donald Trump told him to call Roger Stone and Mike Flynn, both of whom were heavily involved with the Proud Boys. Mike Flynn was very involved with the coup plotters at the Willard. All of that is starting to lead to this idea that, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are the only people in this whole thing who've been charged with seditious conspiracy. You don't have to be present at the riot to be charged. In fact, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, has been charged with seditious conspiracy. He wasn't there. So, this is, I think, where we're leading, and there are going to be new hearings coming up after the after the break here. And those are going to be led, I think, by Jamie Raskin, who is doing the January 6th, insurrection hearings. And I just have a suspicion that we're going to see more of that connective tissue fleshed out. And the MRI is looking a little vague right now, but I think it's going to become more clear as we look at the new hearings.
There's been a lot. Go ahead. Sorry. Good.
No, just the whole thing reeks of Roger Stone in terms of like the kinds of dirty tricks that he likes to foment, and the fact that Stone was having conversations with people in the White House. It seems abundantly clear that at the very least there was a baseline of understanding, and that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were feeling their oats, right? Like, yeah, we're working with the White House here. We're this paramilitary, these two paramilitary groups, which explains their recon efforts in order to map things out. I mean, all of this is they're doing a good job of painting a really good picture of this. And the only thing right-wing media wants to focus on is the ketchup on the walls. And they're pretending that none of the other the web that's being spun and being communicated, they're just pretending they don't see it.
Right, and the same too, I would say, with the car story. And I actually believe the car story was real, and I think it backfills what Trump thought he was doing, but that I don't think is the meaningful stuff. Like when Cipollone says to Hutchinson 4 or 5 days, like on January 2nd, we got to be careful or we're going to get charged here.
Yeah,
that's why they want him to come and testify, because how does a lawyer 4 days from we're led to believe just a rally that we don't know if there's going to be any, how are they worried 4 days out about getting prosecuted for, essentially whatever it is, defrauding the country? I mean, they were aware, there were certain people in that White House who were aware of the conversations that were happening, because they could almost like overhear it. The Giuliani bringing up the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys in that hallway or down the like. Why is that name? Why are those? What is the explanation that those words are being uttered in the White House, except for I'm working with, or we need more security because we're aware of, but they didn't have more security. I mean, there's a reason why those names are being thrown around in there. And so let me ask you this, like where does this lead? Because at the same time, we also have Joe Biden out there, and they did a focus test, 6 months of like consultant class, just BS. And they've come up with, what is it? Uber MAGA, Ultra MAGA.
Ultra MAGA. I
mean, this is insanity. Like, first off, how do people vote against Ultra MAGA? Like, who's got behind their, in parens behind their name? Like, who? This is here it is. Folks, let's get this one thing straight. The Ultra MAGA agenda has always been taking away women's rights in every single state. I don't know who Ultra MAGA is, but it also happens to have been the Republicans' agenda.
And like, also
Liz Cheney, even the blessed Liz Cheney, who, willing to, throw her sister under the bus when it comes to gay marriage, and willing to, chastise people when it comes to torture, and I mean, on and on. Even the blessed one, she also has been promoting take away a woman's right to choose. And so
absolutely,
this is just insanity. It really is. I mean, you know, you could. I think there's an argument that there are certain Democrats who are there to protect corporate rights from the Democratic Party, but they're like, what could possibly explain ultra MAGA other than sheer incompetence?
Well, I think that's what it is. And this obviously apparently they'd done these focus groups where they found that, people really, the idea that there's Republicans and then there's MAGA and then there's ultra MAGA, and you want to make somebody be afraid to be ultra MAGA or afraid to vote for ultra MAGA.
It's like different Pokemon levels,
exactly.
Right? Like the evolutionary processes.
Well, I mean, is there a good MAGA? Is that like the ultra MAGA is the bad one and the regular MAGA is the good MAGA, and the Republicans, they're just great? I mean, I don't know, but we do hear a lot about this thing. We want a strong Republican Party. We need to have a strong Republican Party like we used to have. I'm going, no, not really, because that's what got us here in the first place. Besides which, telling Democrats they need to work for Republicans just seems to me to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard, just generally speaking, much less right now. But you're right. Look, it's Republicans. And if what you're trying to do is tell people, trying to make them, make people vote against these extreme views that are coming out of the right now, that are coming out, you make them vote against Republicans. Make being a Republican a shameful thing. Absolutely. Tell people, look, this is what your part, and I mean, obviously what they're trying to do, they're trying to coax over a few, swing suburban moms or whatever that vote Republican, and they think, we don't want to insult them by saying the Republicans are bad, so we'll just say it's these other people, the ultra MAGAs. But the truth is, they should be told that being a Republican is bad. There should be. I mean, if you're a person who has a conscience, you're pro-choice, you care about little kids being gunned down in schools, you care about the democracy being, attempted coups and the democracy being overthrown, you should not be a Republican, because that is what these people are. That is who they are. That's what they're doing. And the Democrats what is so hard about that? I honestly don't understand it. I don't get it.
Even if they think that they're going to offend the sensibilities, then what you do is you say ultra MAGA Republicans. Like you
at least put that in there. You're right. At least put Republican in there.
Not some like weird third party from like an alien country that is invaded. It's no, they have grown out of the Republican Party. Even if I accept that premise, I'll tell you something that I've said this in the past many times too. My experience at Air America was seeing the consultant class come in. And it is done because people think that they just don't have, they have no answers. And the person with the shiniest watch comes in, and the assumption is they have that shiny watch because they know what they're talking about, as opposed to they have the best presentation and can really snow people who don't have a clue as to what they're doing. And right. That's what I mean. This ultra MAGA thing, it is honestly, it's as if like, some of the people in this leadership haven't been outside, and if there's a deal with Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden, and Joe Biden somehow is going to get accelerated judges because of putting this abortion, anti-abortion judge, who's a lunatic, incidentally. I mean, he's not just, run-of-the-mill anti-abortion. He is a lunatic, some of the stuff that he has ruled on in the past. Where was Chuck Schumer? When Chuck Schumer was in the minority, like where was the deal that he could strike with Donald Trump to get, I don't know, a socialist on the bench, on the federal bench? Like I don't know why it is that the Republicans seem to have these special powers, but it's fascinating and incredibly depressing. And one hopes that maybe some of the Democrats will get the message. I mean, AOC has been the only one, like you said earlier, who has been, who has like a platform and has been articulating the urgency of the moment.
Right. And she says something that to me is just really explained. She says, we have a crisis of legitimacy. I mean, to me, that is, and then she goes on to explain what that means. We have a crisis of legitimacy. Our institutions are failing. You've got, that they've been taken over by extremists. And across the board, they are, threatening our democracy, threatening our rights, threatening our freedoms. And here's how they're doing it. I mean, it isn't that hard to do that. I mean, she seems to me to be, these aren't prepared speeches. She's just saying this off the cuff on Stephen Colbert. It's not like, it doesn't seem like it's that hard to do that. But very few people are speaking clearly on this. And there are some. I think Elizabeth Warren has been, passionate on these issues since it happened. There have been others too. You'll see somebody come on TV, Brian Schatz of, the senator from Hawaii. He's very good as well on social media. There are some who are just out there saying, hey, look, wake up. And that's essentially what it is wake up. This thing is happening. It's real. This isn't hyperbole. This is actually happening. Look at what the court just did. Look, that's all you need to know. That was Mitch McConnell's plan. He fulfilled his plan, and he's not done yet. And, and here's some things that we have to do now. We've got to start getting serious about this. But, this somnambulant approach on the part of the White House and kind of, maybe we'll do the filibuster for abortion. We might do that because maybe that's a good idea, and maybe voting rights or something like that. No, the filibuster, well, it should have been gone a year ago. But, the fact is that is something they can run on this fall. Just go, we have to have 2 more senators. We have to have it because if we don't, everything is going to go. We have to have 2 more senators. We've got to get rid of the filibuster. So, this is the kind of thing I think that they just don't, like I said at the beginning, I feel like there's a sense of paralysis among the Democratic leadership. And I honestly, I just want to be like Cher in Moonstruck and slap them across the face and go, snap out of it. They've got to, this idea that you can just sort of let things unfold and hope that people at some point sort of recognize that threat that's coming from the right, and they'll get out and vote and gosh, do it. Well, by the way, if this case that the Supreme Court decided to take up next term, by the time 2024 comes along, it won't matter how many people have voted.
Right.
Swing states, they could have a huge turnout among Democrats. They could win by, hundreds of thousands of votes, and it won't make a difference because the state legislatures can decide that there was the count was tainted somehow and overturn it. So, this is pretty urgent. It's pretty urgent, and it's tremendously depressing, I have to admit. I'm a little shaken by what I saw this week.